Conversations with Elders, hosted by yours truly, Louis Marie Blanche, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432, where we will be TED Talking in tongues with the elders of all ages, all generations, all races, cultures, and creeds. All gender, religious, or political preferences will be honored and encouraged on Glastonbury Radio 432, Conversations with Elders, where it is our treasured pleasure to roll out the red carpet of golden liquid love light to you in honor of the Queendom Come, soul dancing free to life's heartbeat drum, in honor of mother, daughter, sister, lover, priestess, goddess, friend, sharing the blessings of love's perfect stranger, Deja Vu, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432.
It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic.
Aloha, hola, aho, hello. Here we are on Conversations with Elders once again, and I'm sharing my beloved's Deborah Lynn Kelly's book known as The Garden of a Desert Rose, and we are starting chapter 15 today, and chapter 15 is entitled An Alchemy Moment, and I will read the quotation that leads us into this chapter. The job of the soul, of course, is to cause us to choose the grandeur, to select the best of who you are, without condemning that which you do not select. Neil Donald Walsh.
Christmas Eve turned out to be a marathon. By late afternoon, the weather conditions grew worse, and the local news reported the strong possibility of an ice storm. Conditions in Nashville were already getting bad, and it was moving east toward Knoxville. This bumped up visits to each of Lenny's parents' homes. To please Mac, she did 2 quick loads of laundry. He wanted to wear his white football jersey, and Lenny wanted to wear her new orange sweaters again. In case of ice, they needed to dress warmly. Laundry done and everyone dressed, Lenny packed both gifts and children into her car. They soon arrived at Lenny's father's house. He lived in a beautiful valley at the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. His wife, Lenny's stepmother, was a fabulous cook, and the kitchen table had so much food it was hard to find room to sit down a dinner plate. After an early supper, everyone sat in the living room while Lenny's stepbrother, who had driven up from New Orleans, played his guitar. He always had everyone in tears with funny stories and jokes. Today was no different. He and Lenny's younger brother were much alike. They were always considered the life of the party. When the two of them were together, they competed, telling outrageous story one after another. Unfortunately, due to the weather, everyone cut the evening short. A few hours after their arrival, the family exchanged gifts, and Lenny and her children were soon off to the next stop. The long stretch of road winding its way up to a hilltop cabin where her other set of parents lived was gravel. The sky looked dark and foreboding as her car bounced atop the rough, bumpy road. Still feeling inspired by the fun music at her father's house, Lenny turned the volume of her radio up high. Driving in the loud, noisy car made the slow drive a lot more fun. As her car wound up the steep hill to her mother's cabin, Lenny spotted a lot of new decorations. Her mother was a member of the local garden club. In fact, she had always helped organize. She had actually helped organize the new club after she had moved to this rural community. Along with the large display of lights, her stepfather had built a wooden tree-shaped structure on which sat a dozen white poinsettia plants. Lenny couldn't remember seeing anything as lovely as this flower tree. After exchanging gifts and catching up on the latest news with her stepsisters and their families, they sat in front of a roaring fire while eating chocolate cake and drinking cocoa and coffee. Lenny's children told their grandparents how much they loved their gifts and what they hoped to receive from Santa. When Lenny's stepfather came in carrying a load of wood, he told her that sleet was now falling. Lenny quickly packed up the gifts and headed home with the children. The visibility was terrible on their drive home. Lenny suddenly thought about how horrible it would have been had she not been able to get new windshield wiper blades yesterday. At the moment, she couldn't think of anything as wonderful as those new blades. She dared not to imagine what might have happened on this winding road had her wipers fallen apart tonight instead of yesterday afternoon. Maybe, like the young priest said, she did have an angel in her pocket. She didn't hear a peep from the back seat. Mac was reading instructions for a game with his new camouflage flashlight. Elizabeth was dressing and undressing a Barbie doll. "Hey guys," Lenny said, looking at them in her rearview mirror. "As soon as we get out of these mountains, let's go visit our favorite Christmas lights, that crazy house just a few blocks away from our neighborhood." "Oh boy," Elizabeth said with enthusiastic giggle. "Great," Mac agreed. Maybe they've added some new displays this year," he speculated, smiling broadly. "Only if they've planted new shrubbery," Lenny responded, laughing. "They strung lights on every single thing in the yard last year." Lenny didn't take her usual ride home. Instead, she took a back way so they could see the overly decorated house, ablaze with holiday yard art. The street usually had little traffic except at Christmas. The third house at the end of the lane was so gaudy it just had to be seen to be believed, and the children loved it. Her mother's garden club awarded ribbons to the best decorated homes in their community. Lenny laughed at the thought of this house winning a blue ribbon, but for the joy it gave everybody, it should. After a day of burnt cookies, arguing over clothes, the kids' constant bickering, and the bad weather, laughter was good medicine. Even before their car drove close to the small brick rancher, they could see it blazing against the foggy mist of falling sleet. The oversized plastic cartoon characters were the most delicious of all the displays, and Jesus wasn't left out. A pint-sized manger scene rested atop a bale of hay in the center of the yard. As soon as Lenny saw the bale, she vaguely remembered dreaming about hay. She'd have to look it up in her dream dictionary, she thought, if she remembered it by the time she got home. "Oh, look, Mom, they have a new Tweety bird." Tweety sat in a dogwood tree right next to the manger scene. Pooh Bear hung in another dogwood tree several yards apart. Spotlight shone on each of their faces, as well as on a large snowman at the base of the trees. The rest of the yard was filled with Disney characters, ironically dressed in summer attire. A wooden painted daisy wore a polka dot bikini, and Donald held a rope, about to lasso a snowman wearing a Santa hat. As they slowed their car to take a long look at the yard, Lenny saw two shadowy figures peeking out from closed draperies in a darkened room. The lights from the shrubbery glowed brightly across faces of an elderly man and woman. Lenny suddenly had the urge to cry. She choked it back and rolled down her window to wave at them. "Mom, those people just waved back at us," Elizabeth cried out. "I know," she answered. "Haven't they given us a fun gift this year? Do you have any idea how much effort must have gone into putting all this stuff up?" As she drove onto her street, Lenny couldn't stop wishing those two fun-loving strangers were her neighbors instead of Miss Tallulah. As she unloaded the car, Mac took Lassie for her evening walk. Elizabeth ran into the house to sort her father's gifts under the tree into 2 piles for unwrapping. As Lenny unloaded the last bag from the car, she glanced toward Miss Tallulah's house. Just as she suspected, excuse me, her neighbor was looking out her bedroom window. Lenny thought about pretending she didn't notice, but continuing to wish away her mean neighbor wasn't going to change anything. And besides, she realized that would be wasting an opportunity to practice her newly acquired wisdom of soul power, which, as Don had said, was nothing short of spiritual alchemy. Lenny decided the practice of seeing God in everyone watered your own God seed. Feeling empowered and even a little hopeful, Lenny waved up at the woman peering out the window, but instead of waving back, Miss Tallulah quickly disappeared into her dark house. Well, at least I tried, Lenny thought to herself. Once inside, she placed newly unwrapped gifts under her tree, took off her shoes, and watched her children unwrap gifts from their father. Most of the presents were clothes. He'd also included a check for them to go out and buy anything they hadn't received. One of the gifts he sent Elizabeth was a beautiful music box with a dancing ballerina. She was dressed in a pink satin tutu with rolls of ruffles gathered around her waist. Elizabeth played the music box over and over again. It was hauntingly sweet melody that Lenny had never heard before. She felt relieved that she'd somehow been able to release some of the lingering anger she'd felt for her ex-husband. After the gifts were all unwrapped, Matt called his father. When both children finished talking with him, he asked to speak with Lenny. She dreaded talking to him, but she wanted to try hard not to repeat their earlier quarrel. Taking the phone and placing the receiver to her heart, she silently prayed, Lord, help me see him with new, simple, childlike eyes without judgment or anger. Then she put the phone up to her ear. Merry Christmas, she said in her cheeriest voice. The phone went silent. Lenny wondered if her ex-husband had fainted from the shock. Well, Merry Christmas to you, he said in a dry voice. I want you to know I'm still really mad at you. Well, I'm absolutely not mad at you, Lenny said, and she almost believed that she meant it. In her head, she started repeating over and over, love, 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 not hate. Well, I'm glad to hear that bit of good news, he said. Lenny, you'll never change. When we were married, I never knew if you were going to greet me at the door with kisses or whack me over the head with a frying pan. I never hit you with a frying pan, Lenny said with a laugh. But now that I think about it, I sure wanted to a few times. Well, I have no idea what's come over you, but I'm glad you've stopped hurting our children by hating me. Lenny hesitated before speaking. If she denied hating him, that might not be the entire truth. Did she really hate him, or did she hate his constant lying? Either way, she was supposed to think the best of him. So she pretended that he wasn't a liar, but was instead a man of his word. That felt like a lie, but if it worked for Gandhi, it was worth giving it a try. I'm sorry if you think I hate you, she responded. I don't like how you break promises. I hate it when you say you will do something and you don't. But I have not always been fair with you, and it does affect the children. Please forgive me, she said, and I really appreciate your sending the gift special delivery. It was very considerate of you. The children are fine. They understand why you had to cancel your visit, and they absolutely love their gifts. All the clothes you sent to Elizabeth didn't exactly fit, but she will grow into them. Thank you. It helps me out a lot when you buy them school clothes. And Elizabeth's dancing ballerina has been playing nonstop since she opened the box. By the way, what song does the music box play? I don't know, he said quietly, no longer sounding angry. The box it came the box it came in originally arrived at my store damaged, so I put it in a different box. I might have another one in one of my other stores. I'll check. You know, when I saw one of my sales clerk unpacking it, I knew it was perfect for Elizabeth. Yes, it was, Lenny agreed, wearing a smile and excuse me, wearing a warm and sincere smile. She could tell that he was caught off guard by her compliments. He enjoyed bragging on himself, and hearing Lenny praise his choices for gifts eased some of their tensions. By the time Lenny hung up the phone, she felt both at peace with him and proud of herself. Quick thinking helped her sidestep her way out of another angry confrontation. It was a huge improvement over their last phone call. She walked into the bathroom, brushed her teeth. After getting ready for bed, she looked at herself in the mirror. I think I'm actually starting to like you, she whispered to her reflection.
Oh, so you were saying, looking in the mirror at yourself, saying that about
Yes,
you.
self-love was starting to blossom.
You know, because we mentioned earlier in our discussions the What the Bleep Do We Know movie. The character in that movie had a very hard challenge looking in the mirror and seeing anything to love and
Oh,
appreciate.
yes. And that was me. And that was my mother too. She sort of had that same pattern. And she was beautiful and funny and lovable and the strong, didn't she have this the most, when she was in the room, you were going to laugh, you were going to have fun because she didn't mean to. She was just a natural, humorous lady, very Southern, proper, but funny. And she was so critical to herself. So, you know, we've talked about getting out of the mental prison. One side is created by your parents. So I was very self-critical all my life. And when I looked in the mirror and was complimenting myself, I go back to the sharing of my mother, who was a beauty, think Scarlett O'Hara beauty. And as she aged and grew older, um, she would look in the mirror and hate being old, hate her appearance. And so I think everyone that I have met in my entire life is their worst critic. Looking in the mirror, oh my goodness, you know, it's Body Beautiful. It's coming up a chapter. I won't tell you about it now, but that is the truth. You know, Louise Hay, she wrote a beautiful book and said, I saw her speak on stage a few years back, about the time I published my novel, actually. And she brought on stage a hand mirror. And she said, hello, beautiful, looking into the mirror. I don't know if she was in her 80s or 90s, but that made a big impression on me. And I wish every male and female in the entire planet would do that. Get a mirror out right now and say, hello, handsome. Hello, beautiful. Because you and Mother did that to each other all the time. Every morning she was here before her passing.
Well, you know, they say you're only as pretty as you feel inside.
Yeah.
So that is beautiful wisdom for an alchemy moment.
Yes.
Shall we move on to chapter 16?
Let's do, if we possibly can.
Called Tear Seeds. And this is the quotation that leads into that chapter. And then a strange thing happened. For where the tear had fallen, a flower grew out of it. the ground, a mysterious flower, not at all like any that grew in the garden. Marjorie Williams from the Velveteen Rabbit.
Before the children went to bed, Lenny heated a saucepan of milk for Coco at story time. Elizabeth handed Lenny her copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. The classic tale was also one of Lenny's favorite books. Mac wasn't interested in the story, so he stayed in the kitchen working out the rules of his new board game. Before she started the story, Lenny flipped Elizabeth's book over and read the back cover to set the mood. There was once a velveteen rabbit that lived with a stuffed horse and many other toys. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day. "When a child really loves you, then you become real," said the horse. The rabbit hoped that wonderful thing would happen to him someday. By the time she'd gotten to the end of the book, Lenny was wiping tears away from the corners of her eye. She felt a strong kinship with the tattered and worn-out rabbit, and when he magically became real, it was almost too much to bear. To Lenny, being real meant always being comfortable about who you are, and she didn't know if she had ever really felt real. And most importantly, had she ever felt really loved? This morning, she had awoken from more in the present moment than she felt in years. The heavy tightness around her chest was gone, as if a trauma that had once strangled her had broken loose. Her lucid dream of shaking off a snake had seemingly shaken off years of suppressed anger toward her first husband. Right now, she wasn't ready to even think about her second husband. She would save that hard work for after Christmas. She wondered if the process of individuation, true self-discovery, was simply uncovering what she had created, unreal, versus what God created, real. Perhaps unlike the Velveteen Bunny, she was created real, but by her own creating, she had become unreal. If so, spiritual awakening wasn't about becoming real or about transforming like a caterpillar into a butterfly. It was beginning to feel more like setting a golden winged self free from a prison of poisonous thinking and false identification. If God is love, as the poets and sages wrote, then so was her center. Yet most of the time she didn't feel loved or lovable. And psychologically, this was not where she wanted to spend the rest of her life. Alive, breathing, but constantly feeling disconnected from others as well as herself. A God self, a center, stays where it is. This felt beyond her reach. "Mom, I ask you a question. Are you listening?" she suddenly heard Elizabeth ask. "Sorry, sweetie. I'm so happy we read your bunny story tonight. I was just lost in all the magic." "What did you say?" "I asked you if you thought the nursery magic fairy was prettier than the tooth fairy," Elizabeth said, referring to one of the characters in the story. "Well," Lenny said hesitantly, "she certainly dresses better, and the book did say the nursery magic fairy was the loveliest fairy in the world. Her face was like the most perfect flower ever seen. And don't you love the artist's drawing of her dress?" "Yes, it looks adorable," Elizabeth giggled in her eyes. "I love dewdrop pearls, but do you think she felt wet all the time?" "Maybe she felt a little damp in the mornings," Lenny answered. "The grass feels wet to my feet even in the summer sun, but at the same time it feels nice. I don't think she minds. At the library, I read about a Jimson stone in the desert that sometimes blooms into the shape of a rose petal. It only needs a little moisture to bloom. Are you kidding, Mom? Mac asked, walking back into the living room with a cup of hot cocoa, spilling a long drizzle of brown down the front of his t-shirt. No, Mac, it's called a desert rose. Next week, while I'm off work, we'll plan a trip to the public library, and I'll show you a picture of it. It's technically called a gypsum rosette. Arid, sandy conditions mixed with just a little moisture help Mother Nature create magic in the desert. Elizabeth jumped off the couch and ran into the kitchen for more cocoa, obviously oblivious to the fact that in voicing her exclamation to Mac, Lenny had experienced what could only be called an ah moment. Her granny's message, what she'd been trying to say in the simplest of terms, was suddenly coming alive inside her. For the last 2 days, she'd been totally and insanely obsessed with chasing down the meaning of Granny's visit. And now, just sitting with her children, with her mind completely off the message, its meaning had gently landed like an ever-elusive butterfly. That sounds pretty cool, Max said, smiling. I can't even imagine a rock looking like a flower. I didn't know such a thing existed either, Lenny said. Nature is such a marvelous teacher. If we take the time to see and experience her, by the way, I promised to read 2 books. By the way, I did promise to read 2 books tonight. What book have you chosen to read, Mac? Mac jumped up and ran back down the hallway. He returned carrying an oversized family Bible. The only time it was opened was during the holiday season. Lenny often placed a miniature nativity scene atop the Gospel of Matthew, but this year she'd not been able to locate it. By the way, have either of you seen our little manger scene and figurine set? You know where it is, Mom, Elizabeth said with a surprised look on her face. Remember, I asked you if I could put it in Steve's cage and you said sure. I did? Lenny asked with a surprised look on her face, not at all remembering she had given her daughter permission to put the manger scene in the mouse's cage. Well, I can't even imagine where my mind was when I said Steve could have it. She had to admit her mind constantly swirled in and out of daydreaming. She couldn't help but feel more than a little disturbed by how often she found herself saying and doing things unaware. Could old mental habits be broken? She wondered. More and more, Lenny wanted to live in a place of constant awareness, never feeling disturbed by little annoyances, like burning sugar cookies. To be at peace with herself, her enemies, the entire world, no matter what kind of wildness was standing in front of her. This was her dream center, a place she would never want to leave. Mom, don't take it away from him. He really likes it, Elizabeth pleaded, dragging her mother out of her thoughts. Well, that's nice to hear. But next year we'll buy him a rat toy or draw him a paper Christmas tree instead. That seemed to delight Elizabeth. Mac just rolled his eyes. Now let's read about the real first Christmas, Max said, plopping the heavy book into his mother's lap. I'm too old for kid stuff. But my toy bunny became real, Elizabeth reminded him. Yes, he did become real, Lenny said, patting her daughter's leg. And sometimes, just like with the Velveteen Bunny, our life gets really hard and we cry and cry. And like magic, things change for the better. Like tonight when you were nice to Dad, Mac asked. Mac, do you think I'm not nice to your father? Lenny asked, feeling more than a little hurt. She thought she had covered up her true feelings about her ex-husband pretty well in front of the kids. No, Mom, Mac said, I'm not a kid anymore. I can tell when you get upset and mad. And every time Dad asks to speak to you, you get that mad look on your face. I guess I'm not a good actress, Lenny said, but I'm going to let you in on a secret. I'm trying not to dislike him so much, and tonight was my first attempt, so things went pretty well tonight, don't you think? Yeah, Max said, nodding his head in agreement. I guess they did. Lenny took a deep breath. A part of her wanted to scream out just exactly why she looked so mad when her ex-husband asked to speak to her, but it would only hurt her children. Perhaps she had been swallowing those poisonous feelings for too long, she thought. Perhaps the poison had finally come up and out of her system for good. She hoped so. As she'd seen so clearly, looking down the mouth of her snake, poisonous, angry, and bitter thoughts were deadly. These were thought forms, Lenny's archetypes, anxious to rob her and her children of their peace and happiness. They were not real. They were not God created. But if she continued to manifest and feed them with her negative thoughts and patterns, she would indeed remain lost to her true self. A lovelier, more stable and grounded self. And with it, she would lose a happier, healthier way of spending the rest of her life. Hurriedly, she began reading aloud the passage in the Bible where Joseph meets an angel. But while he thought of these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary, thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. Do all angels wear pearl and dewdrop dresses like the nursery magic fairy? Elizabeth asked, interrupting her mother's reading. That's dumb, Elizabeth, Max scolded. The Archangel Michael doesn't wear sissy-looking nightgowns. He wears armor and a man shirt. It's not dumb, Mac, Lenny scolded back. I'll bet Elizabeth's angel wears dresses of pearl and dewdrops just to please her. Mom, Mac exclaimed with a sigh. You guys are always thinking about clothes. Well, I want an angel and I want a nursery magic fairy, both to watch over me, Elizabeth exclaimed. That'll probably happen, Elizabeth, Max said, sounding frustrated with his sister, but only because you're full of stuffing, just like that old bunny. Elizabeth screamed and hit her brother over the head with her pink Easter bunny. Mac responded in kind, and soon they were wrestling on the floor. Lenny closed the family Bible and started counting out loud. If she got to 3, the kids knew she'd give them her meanest look and send them to their rooms. Mac and Elizabeth jumped back up onto the sofa by the time Lenny had gotten to 2. Lenny continued reading. Then Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him a wife. Mom, Elizabeth interrupted again. Does God get angels to do his work because he doesn't have wings? Lenny quickly shot Mac a warning look that made it clear he was not to slam his sister with his words. Elizabeth, Lenny said, I think God created angels as messengers. He needs to stay in heaven. He's like our center. Everything we see in the world bursts forth from him. And so, like little sheep who often get lost, we need all the help we can get. That's why he created angels. Yeah, you're right, Mac explained. If God went off on some adventure, all the planets would go rolling around like bowling balls and slam into each other. Mom, Elizabeth said, Mac's scaring me. Both of you need to stop talking, Lenny warned. Santa's on his way, and it will be morning by the time I finish reading this chapter. No more questions. It's past your bedtime, and Santa will be here soon. Sure, Mom, Max said, winking. Elizabeth was asleep by the time Lenny reached the end of the page. Mom, what's a Nazarene? She asked sleepily, waking up on Lenny's last word. Not tonight, Elizabeth, Lenny answered. It's way past your bedtime. After the children were in bed, Lenny switched on the television and watched A Christmas Carol. Unlike Scrooge, she was never frightened when a deceased spirit made a call during her sleep time. However, in broad daylight, she reasoned it might be another story. Once, while working at the hospital with Mitzi, Lenny had dreamed of Mitzi's deceased mother, who had died of a heart attack. At the time, Lenny didn't know Mitzi very well. Lenny had brushed away the dream at first because she felt too embarrassed to tell Mitzi about it. Then, before the week was over, she had another dream about the woman. This time, Mitzi's mother insisted Lenny give her daughter a message. She had said, the spirit of Mitzi's mother had said, "Tell Mitzi I love her and I'm proud of her." The second time she visited, Lenny awoke and scribbled down the message as she remembered it spoken. She described what Mitzi's mother was wearing. It was a beautiful sparkling black pantsuit, fitted at the waist with bell-bottom sleeves. It looked whisper thin and dusted with silver moonlight glitter. Lenny, surprised by the encounter, instantly fell back to sleep. The next morning, she had given Mitzi her deceased mother's message, the whole thing, including the note she'd written about her attire. And much to Lenny's surprise, Mitzi believed her. Although Lenny hadn't known it at that time, Mitzi's inner battles had gotten her down. Her mother's simple message of continued loving concern was thankfully very appreciated. As Lenny shared with Mitzi what her mother was wearing in the dream, Mitzi laughed out loud. Then, with tears welling up in her eyes, she whispered, "Mother always wore black. She thought it made her look thin." As it turned out, this was the one clue that had made Mitzi believe she had encountered the spirit of her mother. The experience also brought the two women closer together. Lenny thought about how the clothes of spirits and angels really were what dreams were made of: stardust sprinkles and morning dewdrop pearls. Like Mac had said, women are always thinking about clothes, but in this world and in the afterworld, maybe it's there as well. Maybe it's true as well. Lassie trotted out of Mac's room. She must have been wondering why Lenny wasn't in bed. The dog stared up at her with sad eyes. "Up," Lenny whispered. The dog jumped on the sofa. "You can't sleep either?" she asked into Lassie's curious brown eyes. Lassie wagged her tail, happy for Lenny's attention. Cozy in Lenny's lap, Lassie licked Lenny's hand as Lenny rubbed Lassie's white, fluffy chest. "My life is weird, Lassie," she whispered, "but it's never boring. And I'm sort of glad in an odd kind of way. Do you think I'm weird, Lassie?" Lassie looked deep into Lenny's eyes and wagged her a happy yes, but in a good way. Dogs seemed to know so much more than their masters gave them credit for knowing. As the Christmas television show ended, Lenny tiptoed into the garage. She carefully opened the trunk of her car and removed hidden presents. Back in the living room, she silently scattered them under the tree. She posed Elizabeth's new Barbie doll inside her pink convertible. She arranged Mac's new football atop his shiny new skateboard. Then Lenny walked back into the kitchen. As she did, her body suddenly shivered, covered in goosebumps. She checked the thermostat. It registered normal. She checked to see if the windows were closed and made sure the door was locked. Everything was tightly sealed. Still feeling cold as she walked back into the living room, Lenny pulled a tattered quilt from the hall closet. It was a family treasure made from scraps of clothing worn by her father and his 8 siblings. As she lay back down on the couch and covered herself up with the quilt, she noticed the colored lights of the Christmas tree dancing upon the squares of the quilt, as if calling them back to life. Lenny looked up at the ceiling and watched rainbows of dots flashing on and off. Elizabeth had left Santa a snowman cookie and a small glass of milk. She reached down to pick up the cookie and bit the head off the snowman. It was store-bought and tasted stale. Lenny put it back down on its plate and drank the pasty taste out of her mouth with the last drop of leftover cocoa. Then she polished off the glass of milk. Lassie, who had jumped off the couch when Lenny got up to get the presents, was now curled up close to the heater vent by the front door. It was her favorite spot, besides someone's lap. Lenny leaned back on the couch and caught sight of her new tree topper angel. She studied her crown of stars. 5 was a symbol of life, a symbol of nature, she recalled. It seemed to suit her just fine. Lenny wondered if the white angel missed her 6th star, the missing star, the one she lost before Lenny bought her. What star had Lenny lost? As a child, she used to wish upon stars every night before going to bed. She was slightly younger than Mac was now when her parents divorced. She remembered the pain, and she also remembered vowing that this would never happen to her. What a laugh. She had dragged herself and her 2 children through not just 1, but 2 divorces. She definitely had 2 star wishes ripped off her crown. And like the gooey spot left on the angel's head, a broken childhood dream is the stickiest grief to let go of. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she let them come. A mother can cry on Christmas Eve as long as her children are safe in their beds, sound asleep, she thought. As she patted her eyes with a nearby pillow, she let her thoughts fly by without caring where they went. She wasn't going to follow them tonight. She was way too tired for that. She just wanted to rest in the fragrant arms of her Christmas tree. A wet tear tickled her right ear, and as it did, she heard a soft, whispering voice say, "Arise."
Oh, chapter 16, a tear seed or tear seeds?
Tear seeds.
Tear seeds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lovely metaphor. And how do you like to describe it in terms of taking an overview on this particular chapter?
Well, this is based on true life. And I want to say this. This popped into my mind. A dear soul, a friend, one of the friends that gave me his honest opinion on my book, said to me, "I could never be this honest." And about my life, the mistake, be frank and bold and honest about personal feelings and struggles we have within our own mind and consciousness. And they too had the gift of sight and had visions of the spirit realm, the ethereal realm, I think it's called. But he didn't. His religious beliefs prevented him from ever sharing them, except with perhaps his wife or family. And I thought how sad it is that we're ashamed of I really don't offer advice or my visions unless like happened in this particular chapter. I'm kind of pushed into it by a second dream that it's, look, the angels are behind this. Get over your fear of sounding crazy. And so, but others struggle with what others will think of them if they're too honest, if their ego is feeling shame, too much regret, or too suppressed anger to say I'm angry, or shameful of their true feelings, because we're we are all wearing masks right now. Well, some of us who, to me, are caring deeply for others, but the the thing about this is we have to be honest within ourselves to truly know ourselves and love ourselves just as we are. And I think I have shed more tears during this pandemic than and I'm almost 70 next, I will be 70 next year. I have cried more cleansing tears, as you call them, and releasing things, as you have spoken to me often. You're just releasing. And I wept and wept hearing a doctor who was overworked when this pandemic started. Very beautiful soul, took her life. And I wept and wept, but I painted too. I was able to finish a painting of my white buffalo dream, and I cried all through it. But it was a cleansing tear, and you know, right now, cry if you need to. It's all cleansing and washing this away during this difficult time of 2020. I hope I answered your question.
Well, you did. I shared this movie with you. Was it The Great Mitzi? What was the title of that movie?
Oh, yes, it was a beautiful little story.
It's a story about two children that playing at the beach or playing at a waterfront. They notice something in the water, and they take this with them into their room without telling their parents. And the story evolves where the little boy, it's interesting, it's a boy and a girl, kind of like in your story.
Mm-hmm.
The boy figures out that this odd-shaped device that they found opens up, and it's almost like a magical being. But as the story evolves, this item had come from another realm of existence, another galactic community beyond Earthlings knowing, had dropped off this item in the water. The kids found it, and they opened it up, and I believe a stuffed animal manifested out of this.
I think so.
And the little girl was in love with this stuffed animal.
We need to watch that movie again, honey. Thank you.
But one of the key things in it was that the sincerity, the honest and innocent sincerity of the children was a key factor. This galactic community that had left this item on Earth needed something, a very important something. And that something was the innocent emotion of a child's teardrop. And it allowed the activation of this process. I'm sorry I don't remember the exact title of this movie, but it's a wonderful story. And the other tear idea that comes to my mind, I have a song called Jungle Juice, and I thought of a concept around jungle juice, and I thought, well, what if when people are on the beach, they wear these little plastic devices to protect their eyes, and when they're taking in sun, and I thought, well, what if we had tear cups that we wore just beneath our eyes, and we would each collect the tears that we cry, whether those be tears of sorrow or tears of joy, tears of agony or tears of ecstasy. We just collect our tears. And what if the essence in those tears had an unimaginable power to bring forth just what we need in reality?
Oh,
in
thank you,
this
sweetheart. I
existence.
love that.
So I kind of gave the idea of the song Jungle Juice, I connected it to tears. But I love the title, Tear Seeds is a beautiful title. And that was chapter 16. And we are going to say aloha, ola, aho,
Namaste.
hello for now. Thank you for joining us. And we will be continuing with the Garden of a Desert Rose. Well, that's it for here and now. But until we meet again, this has been Louis Marie Blanche thanking you for listening to Conversations with Elders on Glastonbury Radio 432. Bless you.
Quantum physics and the kitchen sink, the energy that follows the thoughts you think. Quantum physics and the cosmic sea, laws of nature too heavy for me. It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic, much too cosmic.